Hello, NFT enthusiasts, crypto maxis. It's the Jarek Show, guys. And on today's show, we have a very special guest, poet, artist, illustrator, designer, the lovely, amazingly talented Amber Vittoria. Amber, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. This is so exciting to be here.
I am super stoked that you're here, and one, that you're coming to Polygon 2 as well. But before we get into all that, right, and you come in all the way over here to come hang out with us on Polygon, kind of tell us your journey all the way here into Web3.
Yeah, so a little bit about me. I'm an artist. I live and work in Los Angeles, California. My husband and I moved out here about a year ago almost. So we're originally from New York. So it's still a transition for me to say I'm from California, not from New York. But my work is predominantly abstract. And, it aims to, celebrate life and the nuances of being a person and having emotion and just our lived experiences all together. And I first started out in art, studying it in college. I went to Boston University's College of Fine Arts, and my major there was graphic design. But at that time, it was about a little over a decade ago, and design was a little bit more open-ended. I think it's a lot more specific now when it comes to majors, but I loved design because it allowed me to experiment with different types of mediums. You're 18, you want to be an artist, but you're not sure what type of artist you want to be yet. And so I picked design because it allowed me to kind of experiment and buy myself some time. And then when I graduated school, I started to freelance on the side, but I worked full-time as a graphic designer and art director for several years. But my first job was as a web designer at Victoria's Secret, and then I moved to be a designer and then art director at VaynerMedia. And around that time period, I was probably like 3-4 years removed from school, and I knew I wanted to work for myself, but I didn't really know what that looked like. So I started to put together a lot of my illustration work and a lot of my personal work and put it on a website and started to reach out to clients. And that's when I started to build up my freelance practice. So once that got going to a good amount of time, I left VaynerMedia and I worked full-time as a designer at Avon, but I had a better work-life balance because it was an in-house job versus an agency job. And then after being at Avon for about a year and a half, I was able to quit and start working for myself full-time, which was late 2017. And at that time period is when I started to learn about blockchain technology and Bitcoin and Ethereum, and I was 27 and I was like, oh, this is definitely going to be life-changing, things like your car titles and, your health. And at the time, my grandmother was really sick and she'd since passed away. But I remember thinking like just keeping track of her medications and things like that would be so much easier on chain. So I was like, oh, by the time I'm her age, that'll happen. And so I invested, some small amount of money into both Ethereum and Bitcoin, and then kind of forgot about it, and then it pumped, and then it crashed, and then people were like, haha, I told you so. And I was like, oh, okay, I still believe in the technology. And then still freelancing, still working with a lot of awesome clients, whether, it's fashion clients or editorial clients. And then the pandemic hit, and early 2021 is when I started to learn about NFTs. And my husband, a few of his friends, learned about CryptoPunks, and so I started to study that and see how artists were, selling their work on chain. And I really love that the ecosystem celebrated and supported artists, especially during a pandemic, which is a really tough time to be a freelancer, at least in the United States. I can't speak for everywhere, but so I started to mint my work on chain, and it has been really exciting to connect with folks that love my work, that don't know me from New York or now Los Angeles, and to outside of my commercial practice, to be able to make work and sell work and have that work resonate with so many people. So it's been a really incredible journey to be able to connect with so many people through the work that I make in my studio.
Yeah, and before, actually, this is a really interesting question. I didn't know you moved to Los Angeles, right? Before we kind of get into all like the inner workings of history of you and all that great stuff. So how has that kind of change been from like New York to Los Angeles? Tell us about kind of like that change. How day and night is that?
Yeah, so I grew up in New York State, which like an hour and a half north of New
Mm,
York City. I think a lot of people, when they envision New York, they just envision New York City. There's a whole state attached to it. So
yeah.
I would say that New York City is, it's a beautiful, wonderful place to live. It's also a very specific place to live. That's very different than, most other cities, especially within the United States. And it has a lot of energy to it, and it's really exciting, but the apartment we lived in was really tiny. I worked from our kitchen table, which, especially during the pandemic, also doubled as my husband's office table. So it was like one table doing four jobs.
Mm,
And we would visit LA. A lot of our friends moved out to Los Angeles over the last several years from New York, and we would, come out and Airbnb in LA for a few weeks at a time before the pandemic. And we both really loved how it was still very much a city, but it felt a little more spread out, and I don't know, it had a lot of amazing weather, and you're close to a beach that you could use all year round, whereas in New York, there are beaches, but they're not as close, and you can't use them all year round unless you like winter surfing. And I don't know, we just kind of fell in love with that shift. And so now we're renting a place that has a few bedrooms, so we each have our own office. We're not all working on the kitchen table, and
yeah.
it's been really incredible. I'd say the struggle, though, for me is like I'm not the most confident driver just because I haven't driven in so long. I lived in New York for about a decade, or New York City for about a decade. New York State, you have to drive in. There's not as much mass transit, but so now kind of getting back into the swing of like driving and not
Mm,
taking the subway has been a fun transition. But I'd say overall I really do love it, and it's definitely impacted my work too. I feel like my work has like a little more breathing room to it subconsciously than a lot of the work that I made in New York. So I'm excited to see how that continues to change as I live here.
yeah, no, and yeah, I said that's like I said, it's a total huge kind of change, right? And that's yeah, I don't know if I could adapt to that too, like the fast pace in New York and then out in Cali, and I don't know, but as we kind of get into your history, you worked with a lot of like pretty cool companies, right, in your time, right, like Victoria's Secret, at Avon, and everything like that. What are some of the lessons that you took from each one of those major companies, that one that I listed now, but also two some other ones that I may not even know about?
Yeah, so I'd say lessons that I learned from when I worked full time as a designer, I took into my freelance practice when working with clients on like one off projects. And
Mm-hmm.
it was just really helpful to know how to work in a team, especially in college. A lot of our projects were like solo endeavors. So you're making work by yourself, for yourself. And working on a team really taught me how to be able to communicate as clearly as possible and to be able to be efficient in that communication. So majority of the time can be spent on the creative. And then while working full time as a freelancer with clients and publications, that really taught me how to work with art directors instead of being the art director. That was really a conflict as well. And then all of it really informs my work. I think a lot of my freelance projects that I've done with different clients push me in ways that I don't know I would push myself. And then when I push myself into a way that is different than I would have done naturally, and I love it, I then incorporate that into my personal work. So it's really nice how one part of that practice tends to inform the other.
Yeah, I know. Like, and it's just kind of you take different skills from each parts of life, and that kind of made you who you are kind of today. And
Yeah.
I know you get kind of asked this question a lot, right? Like, as an artist, right? What did like, what artists inspire you and everything like that? And yeah, that's great and everything like that. But besides that, right? What other things do you draw inspiration from? Like, like comics, movies, nature, and things like that. What are some other things that you kind of draw inspiration from?
A big thing for me has been nature. I think that's part of the reason why we moved to California. My goal is to see all of the national parks in the United States. I think there are 63 now ish. They keep adding them, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
And I've seen 32. I'm about to see my 33rd in December. We're going to Dry Tortugas National Park, which is off the coast of southern Florida, which is exciting. So nature really inspires a lot of my forms and a lot of my color palettes, but then also the content as well, because I think like nature is so unapologetic in what it is, and sometimes I kind of wish I could be a little more apologetic in how I am and how I look and have that confidence level that I think that things and elements in nature has. So a lot of that heavily inspires my work. And I think that's why I try to go on daily walks every day and things like that. In terms of other forms of inspiration, I think, just talking to other artist friends, they're always very inspiring, and my family is also very inspiring too, to insert kind of those stories into my work.